It is phenomenal.
It brought so many people together.
It really changed me.
It's changed my life.
So why are all these people so moved? The answer begins with one of the most tragic days in U.S. history, and a girl named Rachel whose legacy began that day.
We're going to suspend with our regular news program today to bring you up to date on an apparent shooting at Columbine High School.
Many years had passed since that horrific day when Columbine High School made headlines as the worst high school shooting in U.S. history. And since then, school shootings, teen suicide, bullying, and other problems continue to make the news. The story you're about to see is how one girl's life and death is not only addressing these issues, but also is transforming lives around the world. This is the story of Rachel Joy Scott. Her parents, Beth and Daryl, had 5 children. Rachel was raised with 2 older sisters and 2 younger brothers.
Well, Rachel was my middle child, and she was always very loving, but she was also mischievous. She always had that twinkle in her eye.
Rachel also liked to have fun with Daryl's fiancée, Sandy.
She just had fun with everybody in the family. I enjoyed her. I had a lot of fun with her. I'd cut her hair and she'd tell me jokes and just be fun. She was just, always the type of person you wanted to be around.
Rachel's sister was just sweet and loving. We got along well, and one of the best qualities about her was her honesty, and it made for an easy relationship. And even if it didn't make her look good, she was honest with me and the people around her.
She was real witty and fun to be around. She had this mischievous, adventuresome side, never harmful or hurting anybody or anything like that. But she did have a great sense of humor.
We were pretty close. We were a lot alike, and I just remember she used to always look after me, and I was the youngest in the family, and kind of looked over a lot, and she was just always there. She just always made sure that I was recognized and would hear me, and she was just an amazing sister.
Rachel loved to write and draw on everything, and I remember this one special time when she was 13 years old, and her and I had written some things on the back of an old dresser, and we had talked about some dreams and some plans that we had.
Rachel was an ordinary girl who went to high school and worked at a nearby Subway shop, but Rachel had a special way about her. Outwardly, she was upbeat and loved life.
She would always try to go up to people that were really quiet on that team, people that kind of sat by themselves, and be like, "Hi, how are you?" Just try to get them to loosen up and talk to her and stuff.
She was always the life of the group. People would come in and they would just be down and they would be depressed and that kind of stuff. And she would just go sit by them and she would crack jokes and she would just make them laugh.
She also liked to have fun with what she wore. She didn't necessarily fit into any group, but just enjoyed being herself.
And she would always wear a funny hat, and these things, people saw them and she just totally brightened people's day, and that was her role to everyone.
She didn't have one style. She wore some of my clothes sometimes, and then 2 days later she would wear something pretty. There was a few certain brands that were so popular, and I don't think that was important to her at all.
Being a friend of Rachel's didn't have requirements when it came to what you look like or who you were. She loved on people unconditionally, and she didn't have standards for who you had to be. And she was never part of any cliques at school, and I always thought that was really awesome about her.
Yet, inwardly, Rachel was a deep and passionate thinker, often displaying wisdom beyond her years.
Ethics vary with environment, circumstances, and culture. In my own life, ethics play a major role.
She discovered that through writing, she found a safe place to develop her ideals and emotions.
As emotions shift, decisions drift. As confusion clouds, unsureness bounds.
The pen and paper became her canvas where she carefully shaped her beliefs and values.
All things are hazed, distorted, and out of focus. My heart is numb, twisted, and broken.
I think that she just was one of those people that felt deeply, and she wrote what she felt, and she didn't censor it like the rest of us do through, well, is this going to sound crazy? Does this make sense?
How can I give how can I receive? Nothing can be asked or given to me.
She's sitting there writing in her little journal, which she always wrote in. And I always wondered what was in there, but I never wanted to really ask her because I knew it was private.
When will the world open and see the art in me?
She was intelligent, she was radiant, she was amazing, she was smart, she was witty, she was funny, she was a good actress. I mean, I could go on for hours about all the things she had, but she looked at the world in the right way.
I write, not for the sake of glory, not for the sake of fame, not for the sake of success, but for the sake of my soul.
Rachel's writings gave her the insight she needed to navigate her teenage world. She tested her ideals by living them out and often shared her insights to encourage her friends and family members.
Don't let your character change color with your environment. Find out who you are and let it stay its true color.
Rachel just had a way of putting things in perspective, so things that seemed so terrible really weren't.
Sometimes the truth is hard to give when you know your life will be harder to live.
She was trying to bring together groups. She was trying to show that there is a good side to life, that there's life after high school.
A friend. A friend is someone who can look into your eyes and be able to tell you if you're all right or not. A friend. A friend is someone who can say something to you without you telling them anything, and their words hit the spot.
She was always so true to me, always so true to everybody around her, and it was just so refreshing to have somebody who would be there, who would be nice to you but wouldn't sugarcoat anything, you know, and just be truthful with you all the time.
A friend is someone who can help me and talk to me the way you do. And in you, I have found a friend.
Over the next 16 months, Rachel wrote in a total of 6 journals, hundreds of letters to friends and family members, in yearbooks, and on single pieces of paper placed throughout her room. She continued to shape her values.
Things untold, things unseen. One day, all these things will come to me. Life of meaning, life of hope, life of significance is mine to cope. I have a purpose. I have a dream. I have a future. So it seems.
People always saw that bubbly side of her, and then the people who knew her really well got to see like the deep, passionate side, and so she was so interesting because there were so many like layers to her.
Meanwhile, 2 other students from Columbine High School, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, were also journaling their thoughts. However, their entries focused on violence and death. Eric Harris posted on his website his success with pipe bombs and plans to kill people. However, Rachel, in addition to her writings, discovered other creative and productive outlets, such as drawing and acting, to share the light inside of her.
My first memory of Rachel was when she was in my beginning acting class as a sophomore, and she was absolutely delightful, one of the most enthusiastic people I'd ever had the pleasure to work with.
I love this class because it is inspirational. I feel like I am with people that do not care what I do, as long as it's how I feel. Nothing here can scare me away. I feel comfortable. It's like this class brings out everything I love about theater.
We were both really big actors and actresses, she were, but you know, if there was a new challenge and a new idea the teacher had for kind of an exercise, she was first and she was up there and she was doing it right. And set a precedent for everybody else, you know, and it was inspirational to see her just be able to go out there and just give 100% all the time.
Tomorrow I have an audition. I'm not expecting to get a part. If I don't, I promise not to criticize or become jealous of those who make it. If I get a part, I promise not to let it go to my head.
Rachel was a natural on stage. She decided to perform a short mime at her high school talent show.
I remember the pantomime to music that she did. And I said to her, Rachel, you must prepare this for the talent show. This is too good not to share. She had a gift. Her face lit up when she was performing.
I remember after she had done it, it was really moving, and I asked her if she would teach it to me. And she got real excited and said, "Yeah, Dana, I can teach it to you." But because she was so busy at school, we kind of forgot about it, and we never had a chance to work on it. And almost a whole year passed before we ever talked about it again.
Rachel's love for life carried over into her attitude towards people. No matter what people's opinions were about her, she held a tender heart for the outcasts and unwanted. She wanted everyone to know she genuinely cared for them.
People are crying, losing their minds. People are dying, taking their lives. Will anyone save them? Will anyone help? Will somebody listen? Or am I all by myself?
Everybody loved her because no matter what the person looked like or acted like, she really wanted to get to know them as a person and just be warm and kind to them.
She always saw the glory in the world and saw the sadness and the bad things in the world too, and she always wanted to kind of change the weight of those two things so they were maybe a little more even.
Please reach out your hand, grab a hold of their life. Don't let go without a good fight.
There were always kids who wanted to be around her. There were always kids who wanted to talk to her, and she took time for everyone on a regular basis. She really paid attention to people and what they had to say and really tried to see beyond the surface.
I sit here and tell you to go save a life, but what am I doing to give that good fight?
All times, Rachel was reaching out to everybody the way we're supposed to reach out to everybody all the time. But for some reason, each and every moment of each and every day, she was being kind to every person she met.
Rachel was not bothered that her actions could affect her own popularity.
And I don't think she did not want to be popular. I think everybody would love to be popular. I think that she would have chosen to reach out to somebody over being popular.
I definitely saw how Rachel was compassionate. I mean, she had so many friends, and of all types of people. So I know that she reached out to a lot of people, and she was really concerned about when people were lonely.
Like every day I would have somebody different pick on me. I just looked really down, and she came up to me and just started talking to me. She influenced me. Now I can make a difference and help people.
It's like I have a heavy heart and this burden upon my back, but I don't know what it is.
Yet, even though Rachel loved life, she sensed a heaviness within her. She believed she wasn't going to live very long.
There is something in me that makes me want to cry, and I don't even know what it is.
I just remember Rachel saying, on at least a couple occasions, that she wasn't, going to, she was going to die at a young age, is what she said. And we always kind of brushed it off and said, "Oh, Rachel, don't talk about that. We don't want to talk about dying right now." And she's like, "No, it's not a bad thing. It's not a sad thing. I just know that, I probably will die at a young age, and not a big deal. But I just know that I won't be able to do all the things that you guys are planning."
All I want is for someone to walk with me through these halls of a tragedy.
Rachel was always talking about, the fact that she was going to die young, and on top of that she was going to make an impact on the world. But when she talked about both of those things, it was kind of the same. Neither one carried any more weight than the other.
This will be my last year, Lord. I've gotten what I can. Thanks.
As a sophomore, Rachel wrote these words 11 months before her death. Other people began to notice her heavy heart weighing her down.
Starting in November, she just knew something was wrong, and she couldn't tell what was wrong, but she was kind of sad, and it was like there was just kind of a foreboding.
Just passing by, just coming through, not staying long. I always knew. This home I have will never last.
She had started losing her appetite for things. She wasn't sleeping well, and she couldn't figure out why. And she said, there's nothing in my life right now necessarily that's making me feel like this. I don't understand why I'm feeling this. I just am. Because she's dramatic, I thought she's just being dramatic, but she wasn't.
Realizations come to me on a daily basis. They make everything come out of the haze.
It would have been nice to have understood why she thought that or why she believed that, but I never asked those questions.
For a photo-video class assignment, Rachel was inspired to make a photocopy of her hand and inscribe words that again expressed the future.
What if you were to die today? Tomorrow is not a promise, but a chance. It may not be there for you.
In that same class, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold turned in a video project that also talked about death, but their conclusion was vastly different than hers. In a timely class assignment, Rachel applied years of shaping and testing of her values and ideals to produce a clear picture of her beliefs. The name of her essay was My Ethics, My Codes of Life. In this paper, Rachel defined her 3 most esteemed values for how she lived her life.
My biggest aspects of ethics include being honest, compassionate, and looking for the best and beauty in everyone.
Rachel was always after changing the world for the better, because she'd look around the world, she'd see, there's so much bad going on, and she'd see so much beauty as well, but it was always about making more good in this world, and that she was determined that somewhere along the line she was gonna do that.
I have this theory that if one person can go out of their way to show compassion, then it will start a chain reaction of the same.
In that same month, Eric Harris recorded a video entry stating his vision of a deadly chain reaction.
We need to kickstart a revolution! We need to get a chain reaction going here!
Finally, one of Rachel's dreams came true when she received the lead female role in her school's theatrical production, The Smoke in the Room.
The spring play we were in, the role called for kind of an artsy, kind of out there kind of person, so what'd she do? Without a second thought, without any hesitation, just said, cut off my hair. Rachel was always an amazingly passionate person. Everything she did, if she was going to do it, it was going to be done right, and not just right, perfect.
The character was written with Rachel in mind. It was about a creative girl who was negatively judged by her outward appearance, but inside, she was an extremely loving, giving, and kind person.
She put her heart and her entire soul into that play and into that character. It amazed me how much she gave herself to everything.
A year had passed since Rachel performed in the talent show. Rachel remembered she promised to teach her older sister Dana the mime.
I remember one day Rachel came up to me and she asked me, she said, Dana, do you want to learn how to do the mime? And I was like, yeah. I was like, let's go get our costumes and go in the basement and practice. And so we went down there and she just had me watch her do it a few times and then had me join her. And for the next few hours, we just practiced together.
I'm drowning in my own lake of despair. I'm choking, my hands wrapped around my neck. I'm dying. Quickly, my soul leaves. Slowly, my body withers. It isn't suicide. I consider it homicide. The world you have created has led to my death.
It was the first sunny day of spring in Colorado. Rachel was getting ready for school like every other typical morning. She and her brother Craig hurried to get to a 7:20 a.m. class at Columbine High School.
She was kind of getting on to me about being late, and we started getting into an argument. She was listening to a song on the radio, and I wanted to listen to something else, so I changed the station, and I started to call her names.
That morning, Rachel went to her acting class and was again journaling.
I had my acting class with her, and she was still drawing in her journal. And I knew that it was something important because she'd been doing it all day. Every time I would see her, she was drawing in her journal. But I didn't know what it was.
Approximately 10 minutes before the end of the 4th period class, I saw her drawing, and I asked her about it. And she said, "Well, Mrs. Carruthers, it's not finished, but I was inspired to draw this." And she just looked at me and said, "I'm going to have an impact on the world." And I looked at her and I said, "Rachel, I have no doubt of that."
The bell rang. Rachel closed her journal and headed off to lunch. Hundreds of students filled the cafeteria. Rachel and her friend Richard went outside to eat their lunch. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold waited outside for their homemade bombs to explode. When they failed to detonate, they approached the school and decided to kill students one by one. Eric saw Rachel and Richard eating their lunch. He then shot Rachel 3 times.
Struggling to keep the candle burning. Enemies surround me, blowing their cold breath, hoping to extinguish the flame.
He then shot Richard, paralyzing him for life.
My candle, lit be the last of my matches, is subtle, but it is there. Eating at the last strand of wick, melting the last drop of wax.
Then he came back for Rachel.
Then, darkness. Alone. Laughter, wicked laughter screams in my ear.
And shot her a final time, taking her life.
The coldness rips at my skin, depriving me of my heat. I breathe in the emptiness around me.
Rachel was the first person killed that day.
Taking it in as air, but choking as if it were smoke. Smoke, blackening me within.
Attention South units, have possible shots fired at Columbine High School from one female scout.
Jefferson County 911. Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He has shot out a window, and the school is in a panic. And I'm in the library. I've got students down under the table, kids. Heads under the table. Okay. Oh, God. Stay on the line with me. Oh, God. Kids, just stay down.
The shooters went from the cafeteria and into the library where Craig was hiding. Eric and Dylan taunted their classmates, terrorized them, and eventually killed some. In the end, 13 innocent victims were killed, 12 students, and 1 teacher. That morning, Rachel went to her acting class and was again journaling.
I had my acting class with her, and she was still drawing in her journal. And I knew that it was something important because she'd been doing it all day. Every time I would see her, she was drawing in her journal. But I didn't know what it was.
Approximately 10 minutes before the end of the 4th period class, I saw her drawing, and I asked her about it. And she said, "Oh, Mrs. Carruthers, it's not finished, but I was inspired to draw this." And she just looked at me and said, "I'm going to have an impact on the world." And I looked at her and I said, "Rachel, I have no doubt of that."
The bell rang. Rachel closed her journal and headed off to lunch. Hundreds of students filled the cafeteria. Rachel and her friend Richard went outside to eat their lunch. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold waited outside for their homemade bombs to explode. When they failed to detonate, they approached the school and decided to kill students one by one. Eric saw Rachel and Richard eating their lunch. He then shot Rachel 3 times.
Struggling to keep the candle burning. Enemies surround me, blowing their cold breath, hoping to extinguish the flame.
He then shot Richard, paralyzing him for life.
My candle, lit be the last of my matches, is subtle, but it is there. Eating at the last strand of wick, melting the last drop of wax.
Then he came back for Rachel.
Then, darkness. Alone. Laughter, wicked laughter screams in my ear.
And shot her a final time, taking her life.
The coldness rips at my skin, depriving me of my heat. I breathe in the emptiness around me.
Rachel was the first person killed that day.
Taking it in as air, but choking as if it were smoke. Smoke, blackening me within.
Attention South units, have possible shots fired at Columbine High School from one female scout.
Jefferson County 911. Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun. He has shot out a window, and the school is in a panic. And I'm in the library. I've got students down under the table, kids. Heads under the table. Okay. Oh, God. Stay on the line with me. Oh, God. Kids, just stay down.
The shooters went from the cafeteria and into the library where Craig was hiding. Eric and Dylan taunted their classmates, terrorized them, and eventually killed some. In the end, 13 innocent victims were killed, 12 students, and 1 teacher. Eric and Dylan ended the shooting spree and ended their own lives. Around that same time, Daryl Scott received a phone call from his fiancée Sandy about the shootings that she saw on TV.
My heart was pounding, and I turned on the radio, and an announcer said that up to 30 students had been shot and killed. And I started hyperventilating. I couldn't even hardly catch my breath. All I could think about is I have 2 children at school. I've got a nephew and a niece at the school. And I remember getting caught up in a massive traffic jam because so many people had heard what was happening, and we were just inching forward. And I was crying. I was upset. I couldn't communicate with anyone. I didn't know what to do.
Daryl eventually heard that his son Craig, who was in the library, survived the shootings, but there was no word about Rachel. Daryl was directed to Leawood Elementary, where he and other anxious parents waited as busloads of students from Columbine were transported.
Please let him be on this bus. They told us that buses were coming from Columbine with the students on them, and we had read the list over and over again and hadn't seen Rachel's name. And I rushed outside, and there was a little fence there right outside the school. And I remember climbing on that fence and trying to look inside the bus windows as the buses pulled up. And at one point, I actually thought I saw her. And my heart was pounding, and, it was just momentary because I realized it wasn't her. And that was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we had just about given up hope because the shooting took place at 11:30. And our only hope was that she was either on that bus or she was in a hospital wounded somewhere. And we had called the hospitals, and there was no Rachel Scott. And so I can't even begin to describe the feeling when the last student walked off that bus and there was no one left to get off, and Rachel wasn't there.
As day turned to night, hope was being replaced with despair. It appeared that the light in Rachel was gone. At 11:30 a.m., the Scott family received confirmation from the coroner's office that Rachel died in the shooting.
We had a lot of people in our home,
And nobody knew what to say or nobody knew what to do.
and there was just a big wail.
There just rose this symphony of grieving.
Every single person I loved just burst into tears.
We went for 24 hours and didn't know whether she was alive or dead. Now, we pretty much suspected by 5 o'clock that evening, and we pretty much knew in our hearts by 10 or 11 o'clock that night, because she would have contacted us. But not knowing is a horrible, horrible situation to be in.
The tragedy at Columbine High School sent shockwaves around the world.
I would be misleading you if I said I understand this. I don't.
People were stunned by how such a horrific act could be done by students against their classmates. Rachel's car became a gathering place where friends and family could grieve. The Scott family, joined by 3,000 members of the community, gathered for Rachel's funeral. Her friends wrote on her casket their final words to a girl who encouraged so many. CNN televised the funeral service uninterrupted. It was their largest logged viewing of any broadcast shown at the time.
She had this fun, full of life side where she had so much energy and she made people laugh.
She was herself to be herself and not to prove a point. And because of that, she was true to everybody else.
Millions of people tuned in to watch the funeral of a girl who impacted so many with kindness and compassion. One man named Frank Amedia, who lived over 1,000 miles away in Ohio, was deeply touched by her funeral.
I remember the morning when the funeral of Rachel Scott was taking place. My heart was breaking and weeping, and I literally was crying.
Frank would soon find out that this would connect him to Rachel's story forever. Back in Littleton, Daryl and his oldest daughter, Bethany, were going through Rachel's belongings. While searching, they discovered the essay Rachel wrote 1 month prior to the shootings called My Ethics, My Codes of Life.
And as I began to read the words, it was like a confirmation of who she was from what we had heard from her funeral, from her friends who talked about her kindness, her compassion, and her love for other people.
We were just starting to discover some of the things Rachel left behind in her writings, but because that was written right before her death, and it was so wise beyond her years and so beautiful, my dad and I just broke down and cried after we read it together on her floor.
For several weeks, Frank had a reoccurring dream about Rachel. Even though Frank did not know Daryl, he felt persuaded to locate and contact him.
I remember waking up early one morning and I was just thinking about life without Rachel and how there was going to be such a huge void there. And just a short time later, my phone rang.
I remember saying, Mr. Scott, this is Frank Amedia. I'm a businessman from Ohio. You don't know me.
And Frank began to describe to me this dream that he kept having.
And what I clearly saw was an eye, and it was the eye of a young girl, and tears were falling from the eye. And as they hit the ground, then a flower came rising up out of the ground.
And after he told me the dream, I told him, I said, Frank, the dream doesn't mean anything to me. There's not any connection there.
And my heart sunk as deep as it could go. And then as fast as I could, I got out of him what I had to say, and that being that I know that this is for great meaning in your life. You've been called to do something wonderful. The death of your daughter wasn't for nothing, and it has meaning, and out of her death, millions of people will be touched. Your life will be changed.
After talking to Frank, I honestly didn't know what to think, but I thanked him anyway.
And I said, sir, if there's anything I could ever do for you, this is my name, this is my number, please give me a call.
Not too long after Frank's phone call, Daryl received a call from the police. They were holding onto Rachel's backpack as a part of their investigation and wanted to return it to the Scott family.
And I took it out to my car and I took out some of her school books. And at the bottom of her backpack was her final diary. And I took it out, and like any parent, I wanted to see the last thing she had written before she died. And so I quickly turned to the last page of her diary, and I was absolutely stunned. I sat there for 35 minutes hyperventilating. I couldn't hardly catch my breath because I was looking at a picture she had drawn just minutes before she died. And it was a picture that had been described to me in a dream by Frank Amedia 7 days earlier. She had drawn a picture of her eyes, and a trickle of tears were falling from her eyes, and the tears were watering a rose. And when the tears touched the rose, they turned to blood drops. And I counted the clear tears. Before they turned to the blood drops, there were 13 of them. Within 2 hours of her drawing that picture, 13 people had been murdered at Columbine, a teacher and 12 students. And in another picture, Rachel had drawn that same rose with the same blood drops, but the rose, America's national flower, was growing out of the Colorado State flower, not out of the ground. And the Colorado State flower is the Columbine, the name of the high school. I think that's when I first began to realize that there was something bigger than I had seen, that the words I wrote on her memorial cross were not accidental, that her life was meaningful and her death would not be in vain. Looking at that picture that day was, I think, a beginning point for me to realize that there was a big purpose that lay out ahead.
Meanwhile, the families of the 13 who died were thrown into a whirlwind of media attention while they grieved for their loss. Many people wanted to find ways to ensure that this kind of tragedy would never happen again. Many sought for stricter gun laws. Daryl, in the midst of his grief, wrote a poem that expressed his feelings.
Now gunshots fill our classrooms, and precious children die. You seek for answers everywhere, and ask the question, why?
A few days later, Daryl was invited to speak at the U.S. House of Representatives Judiciary Committee, where he shared his poem and beliefs with the world.
Since the dawn of creation, there's been both good and evil in the heart of men and women. And we all contain those seeds. We contain the seeds of kindness and the seeds of violence. And the death of my wonderful daughter, Rachel Joy Scott, and the deaths of that heroic teacher and the other 11 children who died must not be in vain.
Soon after his appearance before Congress, his speech was downloaded from the internet and forwarded to many, all of a sudden, his phone began to ring non-stop. People from around the country called to thank him for his speech and invited him to speak to their groups. One of the first crowds that Daryl and his sons Craig and Mike spoke to was a group of 14,000 teens that gathered for the event.
I remember looking out at that massive group of young people that day and just being in awe that that many young people could be in one place and be so quiet in honor of the 13 victims that had been killed at Columbine.
Through Daryl's speaking engagements, many people around the world were touched by Rachel's story and her family's ability to forgive those who killed her. Celebrities, talk show hosts, and 2 presidents requested the Scott family for meetings and interviews.
You know, after the shooting, probably the biggest thing that I dealt with was anger. And I also was angry at myself at times for how I had treated Rachel. I chose to let go of that anger and hatred and forgive the 2 shooters.
Finally, after an emotional year of losing her sister, Dana performed the mime Rachel had taught her at an internationally televised event commemorating the first anniversary of the shootings.
It was as if Rachel knew that she was going to die and she needed to pass the mime off to someone else. And it personally meant so much to me that I got to be the one to perform it.
Daryl and Sandy Scott were married 8 months after Rachel died, and they continued to travel and speak at many gatherings. Thousands of students were impacted by Rachel's story, and the Scotts knew this was the beginning of something greater. But they needed a good program that would work well in the schools. Daryl revisited Rachel's essay called My Ethics, My Codes of Life. He and Sandy realized that Rachel herself had already written the blueprints for the school curriculum.
Trust and honesty is an investment you put in people. Compassion is the greatest form of love humans have. I have this theory that if one person can go out of their way to show compassion, test them for yourself and see the kind of effect they have in the lives of people around you. You just may start a chain reaction.
The Scotts discovered many lifelong lessons from her lifestyle and writings and summarized them into 5 main challenges. Her essay became the basis for the new school and community outreach called Rachel's Challenge.
Everything the program is based on was created by Rachel in her journals, her thinking, her kindness.
Daryl and Sandy Scott formed Rachel's Challenge to create a culture in schools and communities that disarms bullying, violence, and suicide by teaching the power of kindness, compassion, and acceptance. 2 of their supporters believed they could get El Paso, Texas schools to embrace this new initiative.
My codes may seem like a fantasy that can never be reached.
With great hope, the Scotts assembled a team of Rachel's friends, siblings, and others to share Rachel's message of kindness and compassion. After months of preparation, the El Paso schools graciously opened up their doors for a full week of assemblies. 33,000 students' lives were touched by these presentations. Students were encouraged to accept Rachel's challenge to create an ongoing culture of kindness, compassion, and acceptance in their communities.
But test them for yourself and see the kind of effect they have in the lives of people around you.
It was real powerful. I never really thought about things like this.
It touched a lot of people's hearts, I hope, because what happened is not a game.
But how do you know that trust, compassion, and beauty will not make this world a better place to be in, and this life a better one to live?
Although Rachel's story is a powerful one in itself, Rachel's Challenge has become more than an assembly program.
One of the unique things about Rachel's Challenge is it is not just for 1 year, it's for multiple year application.
Professionals were hired to develop training manuals, tools, and other materials for schools and businesses to sustain the positive message of Rachel's Challenge.
There was so much material that Daryl had accumulated from Rachel that he asked us to come in and help him structure it and organize it so it would work in the school environment.
Rachel's Challenge has taken a great deal of time and effort to really research out the basic principles that build positive, healthy relationships.
I want to look at this right quick. This is another worksheet out of Rachel's Challenge. It's a read and reflect. Rachel took initiative to reach out to those around her.
I have this theory that if one person can go out of their way to show compassion, then it will start a chain reaction of the same.
This program can be used in every setting in the world. It's not just for schools. We can have chambers of commerce use it to get it into the communities. We can have corporations create a culture of compassion and kindness and change the work environment. But when it starts at the school-based and we start teaching kids right from the beginning of school about kindness and compassion, they're going to grow up to be adults who are kind and compassionate. And it just starts a chain reaction, and that's what it's all about.
Dozens of presenters now share Rachel's message through multiple programs, not only throughout North America, but also to other countries around the world.
One of the wonderful things we see from Rachel's story is that so many people who have been bullied or been victims of some type are finding hope through her story.
When Rachel's Challenge came and spoke to us in February, I didn't think I would be changed. I honestly didn't. That day, I had planned, after school, to commit suicide.
Hope shared with us the fact that she had those feelings of isolation and being overwhelmed.
I actually had a rope and pills in my bedroom waiting for me when I got home.
When this program came, it made her think twice about that.
If she was so similar to me and didn't deserve to die, then neither did I. After that day, I started being more kind to people, and I gained a lot of friends because I wasn't always as down as I normally used to be.
Without Rachel's Challenge, this little one wouldn't be here, and he is my heart and soul, my entire world. I would do anything for him.
Rachel's Challenge receives hundreds of unsolicited emails per year from students thanking them for saving their life.
Trust and honesty is an investment you put in people.
Hope's story was a direct result of our Friends of Rachel program, and that program, which creates clubs in schools, continues to impact lives.
While the assembly itself was very touching and moving, it's the sustaining piece of the Friends of Rachel that I see that separates this particular program in assembly from others that we've had, where it's still here, it's still with us, it's growing.
So many programs that we bring into the school are paper and pencil kinds of programs, and they're very static. With Rachel's Challenge, they're dynamic, and they're up on their feet, and they're active, and they're doing things that really make them feel good about themselves.
It is making a huge difference in the school. I see a lot more people who are becoming open to each other, and they're not scared of who they are because they know someone else is out there for them.
It's not just about your school, it's about your community. It's about how you treat people in general. It's a lifestyle, it's not a club.
Over 2,000 Friends of Rachel clubs have been established throughout North America.
My definition of compassion is forgiving, loving, helping, leading, and showing mercy for others.
What we found with Rachel's story is not only the kids that are bullied are impacted, but the kids doing the bullying are also impacted.
I shared Rachel's Challenge at a high school, and at the end of the assembly, a boy walked up to me and said, "How do you apologize to 400 students for being a complete jerk for the last 10 years? And didn't really know what to tell him, but just gave him a hug and said, "I'm sure you'll think of something." And later that day when I came back for the evening event, the principal about tackled me in the parking lot. He was so excited. And he said, "You won't believe what happened today." He said at the end of that day, this boy who had been kind of a troublemaker was standing outside the school, and he was standing there crying and holding a sign above his head that simply said, "I'm sorry." And that night, as the principal introduced me to share Rachel's story for the parents, he said, "I had heard that this program reaches the unreachable." And he said today it did.
Through Rachel's Challenge, school bullying is reduced by up to 60%.
Look hard enough and you will always find a light, and you can even help it grow.
We bring together a cross-section of the school, and we bring together the kids that have been bullied and the bullies. And we start a chain reaction of kindness and compassion in those students through fun, activities, games, and some very serious moments. And then that permeates through the whole school and even out into the community.
The chain reaction days specifically go much deeper than what the assembly does. It makes the message more personal. It gets them out of their box.
Try as we might, there's no substitute for this experience that you get in here. The way things are framed and set up is first rate.
A close friend of mine told me that he was thinking about, committing suicide, and he told me that he, thank God I was there because I saved his life.
Seeing how many people actually apologize to me and seeing how many people actually care about me. I've seen the real them, and I never seen that before.
Every school should do something like this because it would be great.
97% of schools recommend Rachel's Challenge programs to other schools.
Rachel's story has always had an impact on individuals and brought transformation, but it doesn't have to start with children. It can also start with adults and with entire communities.
New at 6, how an act of kindness continues to spread in Idaho classrooms.
Every March, Idaho's News Channel hitches its wagon to whatever the horse is that year. We've decided to do it. But this year we really decided that we needed to go for character building, and nowhere better than Rachel's Challenge. You want to find out how to build character in your community? This is it.
I'm amazed that 6,000 people in the Treasure Valley took time out to come hear Rachel's message.
This is the kind of program that can bring about lasting and real change.
I think that's what's so great about Rachel's story, is it's not about trying to reach the world, it's about trying to reach that person across the street.
Over 2 million people hear Rachel's story in live settings each year.
One of the ways that we celebrate Rachel's message and move it from the schools to the communities is by having what we call a Rachel's Rally.
Welcome to Rachel's Challenge Rally!
We're here today for Rachel's Rally, all the schools getting together to show what they've done this last year, to show kindness and compassion and how we're building that within the schools, getting the message out.
Every single one of these links represent an act of kindness in your life, in your school, in your community.
The rally's going to have just some unique, fun things. So we got people who are going to walk in with poles. We're building big chandeliers. It's going to be a very visual way to say kindness and compassion is happening in the schools in Rockford.
Today we had about 8,000 students who came out and carried chain links of kindness.
When you overwhelm meanness with acts of kindness at this amount, just thousands and thousands of different kind acts, it just overwhelms anything that's mean.
There are millions of documented acts of kindness to others annually.
People will never know how far a little kindness can go.
We had just experienced an amazing couple of years in which we had seen Rachel's story impact lives all over the world. And then my daughter, Dana, called me, and what she told me just blew me away.
I found another writing from Rachel, and I forgot that we had written on the back of an old dresser until we moved it. And I guess I hadn't noticed it at the time that it was written, but I couldn't believe it. Rachel had outlined her hands.
And inside of her hands, she wrote, "These hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts."
By the time we found that drawing, millions of lives had already been impacted. And today, Rachel's chain reaction continues to touch the hearts of millions of people.
Over 5 million people each year are exposed to Rachel's story through TV, internet, and print.
You just may start a chain reaction.
It's still amazing to me to see after all this time the profound impact that Rachel's Challenge has on students every day.
It's really inspirational and it's a huge impact.
It's the whole package that makes it so powerful. It's her story, the kind of person that she was.
I was really moved by today's assembly.
It's life-changing. And if you're a part of it, you're going to feel it from your head to your toe.
It has surpassed any goal I could have ever put in my mind.
It's giving students permission to reach out, to be kind, to be positive.
I believe in the chain reaction, and I just wanted to be a part of it.
The response from the parents regarding Rachel's Challenge has just been phenomenal. And they said, man, this Rachel's Challenge thing's making me behave better at home. My kids are holding me accountable.
If our kids are practicing kindness and compassion, then we can practice that too in the business world.
It was really good. It's like really inspired me to be kind.
She knew she was going to die young. She knew she was going to change the planet, and in the end, it's exactly what she did.
Don't keep me from my dreams. I can reach them if I believe. One day the world will see what I know burns inside of me.